impact in the fight against drug cartels has become a reality. President Trump officially designating them as foreign terrorist organizations.
Marnie, good morning. Now, with this designation, Mexican cartels now will be joining a list of foreign terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and new generations cartels, which are involved in human trafficking, violent crimes, but also fueling the fentanyl crisis here in the United States. Now,
September 2nd, 2025. 11 cartel smugglers vanish in fire on the Caribbean Sea. No warning, no survivors, no explanation from the U.S. Navy. Viewers asked, was this a rogue strike or the opening shot of a new war? What you're about to see is how one isolated ship explosion connects back to a secret order signed weeks earlier, and why it signals a historic shift in U.S. military doctrine against cartels. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video.
officials say that Mexican cartel operations across the border threaten U.S. safety and security. Now, Mexican leaders, including former President, this designation does allow the U.S. government to freeze cartel money, ban travel, and punish anyone helping these criminal groups. Mexico, when he was signing those executive orders, Marnie, Trump did say that it could happen. Right now, we'll just have to wait and see.
How did one burning hull off the coast of the Caribbean become the symbol of an entirely new kind of war? The answer begins on September 2nd, when a Venezuelan vessel with ties to Tren de Aragua was caught in open waters. Witnesses later described flames consuming the ship within minutes, the crew disappearing into black smoke and debris scattering across the tide. What stood out even more than the violence itself was the official silence. No statement came from naval commanders. No acknowledgement was made by U.S. Southern Command. The line out of Washington was stillness, as if the entire event had never taken place. Yet satellites and maritime trackers confirmed the vessel was there one moment and gone the next. It raised a question. Was this simply another interdiction, or did it mark the beginning of something far more deliberate? For weeks, speculation circled. Analysts said it could have been a Coast Guard strike. Others suspected Colombian or Panamanian forces, and some insisted it was nothing more than an accident involving volatile cargo. But then a connection surfaced that changed the tone completely. Records from inside the Pentagon referred to a directive signed less than a month earlier, August 8, 2025. That document, classified at the time, redefined the way U.S. forces viewed cartel activity. According to officials familiar with its contents, cartel safe houses, smuggling hubs, and hardened bunkers were no longer police matters. They were designated as military objectives. What that meant in practice was that a network of stash sites, rural compounds, and even underground tunnels fell into the same category as terrorist outposts once did in Iraq and Afghanistan. This shift was not subtle. It altered the rules of engagement.
So in that new executive order, President Trump is also targeting MS-13, that's the Salvadoran gang, as a foreign terrorist organization, but also is already active in 16 states. And here in Texas, the Venezuelan gang already has an active presence in El Paso, Houston, Dallas. Power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign criminal networks here in the United States through the Alien Enemies Act.
Previously, U.S. counter-narcotics efforts operated under law enforcement restrictions, interdicting boats, seizing drugs, making arrests. The military played a supporting role while DEA agents and federal marshals led operations. That model aimed to disrupt supply and capture individuals rather than destroy infrastructure. The August directive erased that framework. It gave the Pentagon authority to apply battlefield tactics against cartels. The Venezuelan ship destroyed in flames no longer looked like an accident. It fit the pattern of the first offensive test of this policy, where the smugglers themselves were treated as enemy combatants rather than criminals. Proof of how radical this was comes from the weapons considered. Take thermobaric munitions, for example, sometimes called vacuum bombs. They detonate a cloud of fuel that ignites with massive overpressure, sucking oxygen out of tunnels and collapsing reinforced chambers. In a mountain complex or beneath urban blocks, that effect is devastating. Such weapons were once reserved for taking down Taliban caves in the Hindu Kush.
Cartels control vast territories just south of our southern border, effectively controlling who can and cannot travel to the United States. Congress has declared war on or has engaged in invasion. Now, President Trump on Monday also declared an official emergency on the southern border, saying, quote, Mexico, hundreds of thousands of Americans have tragically died from drug overdoses because of the illicit narcotics that have flowed across the southern border. For now,
military planners had clearance to use them against cartel passages in northern Mexico and Central America. The message was sharp. If a hideout was being reinforced with steel doors and cement, it would be targeted as though it were a bunker. The urgency behind this directive stemmed from domestic numbers that could not be ignored. In 2024, more than 80,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses, with fentanyl leading most of those statistics. Nearly every community felt its presence, from small towns in the Midwest to major coastal cities. Accidental overdoses hit record highs, parents buried children, and public pressure mounted with each quarterly report. Federal policing had not slowed the pace of these deaths. The administration looked at cartel networks feeding that supply and saw not gangs but hostile organizations thriving off mass casualties at home. That narrative fueled the shift to a battlefield approach. Seen in that light, the Caribbean strike no longer appeared as a patrol ship intercepting contraband. It was the first live execution of a policy that changed definitions at the highest level. The smugglers were not arrested for trial. They were erased by force, their vessel left as twisted wreckage on the seafloor. It was both a demonstration to the cartels and a signal internally.
Saying that the United States has officially declared the following as foreign terrorist organizations: Tren de Aragua.
She does oppose it, and just about 30 minutes ago in her morning brief conference, she did say that Mexico is a sovereign nation, Marnie.
MS-13, the Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, the United Cartels, the Gulf Cartel, the Northeast.
The United States would no longer treat narco-trafficking syndicates as a law enforcement nuisance, but as military enemies. And that leads to the deeper question: if narco cartels are now labeled and targeted like insurgent or terrorist groups, what does that mean for Mexico, for the strategies being developed along the border, and for the international laws that once kept the war on drugs distinct from conventional war? The battlefield has shifted. Cartel compounds once raided by police forces are now marked on military target lists once reserved for insurgents abroad. This change means fortified safe houses, weapon caches, and tunnel networks can be hit with precision airstrikes instead of court warrants. The policy redraws the map, bringing the war on drugs into the combat arena. But the question now is whether collapsing tunnels with bombs will cut fentanyl pipelines fast enough or spark a war just across U.S. borders. Tell me in the comments, is this necessary protection or a reckless move that invites something even more dangerous?